Run? Okay. Well, first of all, Chelsea was the top scorer last week and read it 93 seconds. So, but she didn't have her her pal with her, Rhonda, who's here today. I don't want to get you to read first, okay? Because you did it last week. So how about we start? Let's just go around this way. Okay? Let's get Michelle. And by the way, we've got Christina here today. So what I did with Christine is I put her in the middle group because I don't know how she reads. So one of the teams, team 3, will have 3 people.
Who is that team?
That is Michelle, Regina, and Christina.
Okay.
Why did you want her on your team?
No.
Okay. Let's see. You ready to begin? Okay, start.
In every one of our stable industries, and these are industries mostly affected by the existing recession, the trouble arises not from under-protection, but from under-consumption. If a bold financial policy will transform the demand that exists in our home markets into an effective demand, in other words, will increase the purchasing power of our American customers, there is no doubt the effects of that policy will stimulate production and ease the burden of unemployment. All accountants who are called upon to interpret the existing income tax legislation will realize that the imposition of the new tax upon the earnings of investment company reserves bristles with difficulties and is fraught with anomalies. Half a dozen questions will immediately spring to their mind. The treatment of investments in a subsidiary company, the case of financial and investment companies whose total incomes are derived from extraneous sources. The hardship of the new tax on poor shareholders and the double taxation of richer are only a few of the queries that will at once demand an answer. The whole subject has not yet been cleared from the fog that obscures every question of a political nature in its preliminary stages.
Good for you. You know what? This was a difficult one.
Yes,
It really is. It's a mouthful. Do you all know what the word fraught means? Nobody looked it up.
Is it like distressed? Yeah.
It means that you're stuck with. Like another word you could use that is beset with. You're stuck with. Okay. You may not hear that. So, but this is a mouthful. So that was pretty good.
And what's bristles?
Let's see, 120, 137.
Here, hold on. I looked it up because I was like, I kept getting stuck on that word. I'm like, what the heck is bristles?
Okay, 137. Okay. You went last week it was 119.
It says like to take offense. Bristles? Yeah, to take offense. React
Bristles?
angrily or defensively. Is that what the term means?
What?
Bristles?
Bristles, yeah.
Like to take defensively.
I'm hoping that some of these passages will give you an opportunity to challenge your literary material, okay? That's really why I chose literary, because it's tough. And whenever you're not sure of a word, and most of the words you're going to get familiar with anyway, you'll find that some of these passages are similar. I think next semester what I'd like to do is go to a website called Vital Speeches of the Day and take actual speeches from the president and Secretary of Defense or whatever. I'll try and find those, when they give commencement speeches and things like that.
Can you talk a little louder? I'm sorry.
Well, can you move over a little bit closer? There's a seat right here.
I just have here and follow.
Okay. All right, so we're ready for Regina? Ready? Begin.
In every one of our stable industries, and these are the industries mostly affected by the existing recession, the trouble arises not from under protection, but from under consumption. If a bold financial policy will transform the demand that exists in our home markets into an effective demand, in other words, will increase the purchasing power of our American customers, there is no doubt the effects of that policy will stimulate production and ease the burden of unemployment. All accountants who are called upon to interpret the existing income tax legislation will realize that the imposition of the new tax upon the earnings of investment companies bristles with difficulties and is fraught with anomalies. Half a dozen questions will immediately spring to their mind. The treatment of investments in a subsidiary company, the case of financial and investment companies whose total incomes are derived from extraneous sources, the hardships of the new tax upon the poor shareholders, and the double taxation of the richer are only a few of the inquiries that will at once demand an answer. The whole subject has not yet been cleared from the fog that obscures every question of a political nature in its preliminary stages.
Whoa.
Good job.
That is really
That was
challenging. I don't want to apologize, but that was good. 130, 128.
That's good. That's right. This is a
Okay,
hard
that's
one I
cool.
thought too.
And then we'll get Christina. Okay.
She said, oh.
Yeah, you're in this group.
Okay.
You ready to read? Pretend like you're in a courtroom. I got to hear you.
Oh.
And we've got getting it taped, so we want it for our other students as well online.
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Begin.
In every one of our stable industries, and these are the industries mostly affected by the existing recession, the trouble arises not from under protection, but from under consumption. If a bold financial policy will transform the
Demand.
the demands, in other words, will increase the purchasing power of our American customers. There is no doubt the
Effects.
the effects of that policy will stimulate production and ease the burden of
Unemployment.
unemployment. All accountants who are called upon to interpret the existing income taxes legislation will realize that the imposition of the new tax upon the earnings of investments companies bristles by difficulties and is fraught with
Anomalies.
Okay. Half a dozen questions and will immediately spring to their minds. The treatment in investments
Of investments.
of investment companies whose total incomes are derived from extraneous sources. The hardship of new tax. The new tax.
On the
On the shareholders and the trouble tax.
the double taxation.
Double taxation of richer are only a few of the inquiries.
No, the queries.
Inquiries that will at one grant
At once demand.
once demand and answer the whole subject has not yet been cleared from the fog that obscures every question of a political nature in its preliminary stations.
Okay, cool. That was a good example. That was really good. On page 201. I have to tell you that what you did, and I would suggest, because when you go to stenotype this, for your software, use a paper. I mean, I use a ruler. There were 2 lines where the word demand began that line, and you missed a whole line. And then another line, investments, was very close to the next line, investments, and you skipped that too. So, I mean, you obviously moved your head away from the paper.
Yeah.
Or if you did, you just work with a ruler so that you make sure you're getting every line. And then the other thing I would suggest to you, which you should be doing anyway on a regular basis for a lot of stuff, is print out the notes and then check them word for word with everything in this passage. And that way you'll know that you got it right or not. Okay? And you don't want to have to start, crossing out and Xing out a line. You want to have a good, clean copy. So just take your time. Just do sentence by sentence stenotyping it, after you've practiced some of the words. So you have a good, clean copy, and your confidence in reading back will be a lot better. Okay? Okay, let's see. Let's go to number... Let's do Daisy and Shannon. Daisy, where's she? Okay, there she is.
Am I going first? I don't care.
Daisy's first. Ready?
Yeah.
Begin.
In every one of our stable industries, and these are the industries mostly affected by the existing recession, the trouble arises not from under-production, but from under-consumption. If a bold financial policy will transform the demand that exists in our home markets into an effective demand, in other words, will increase the purchasing power of our American customers. There is no doubt the effects of that policy will stimulate production and ease the burden of unemployment. All accountants who are called upon to interpret the existing income tax legislation will realize that the
Imposition.
the new tax upon the earnings of investment company reserves bristles with difficulties and is fraught with anomalies. Half a dozen questions will immediately spring to their mind. The treatment of investments in a
subsidiary
company, the case of financial and investment companies whose total incomes are derived from extraneous sources, the hardship of the new tax on the poor shareholders, and the double taxation of the richer are only a few of the theories that will at once demand an answer. The whole subject has not yet been cleared from the fog that obscures every question of a political nature and its preliminary stages.
Cool. Okay, 121, 156. Okay. You're staying around your rate, so that's pretty cool. Shannon,
Okay.
you gonna read through a storm?
This one's hard, okay.
Yeah, it is really tough. So kudos to all of you. This was challenging. I didn't realize how challenging it was. Okay, ready? Begin.
Yeah. In every one of our staple industries, and these are the industries mostly affected by the existing recession, the trouble arises not from under-protection but from under-consumption. If a bold financial policy will transform the demand that exists in our home markets into an effective demand, in other words, will increase the purchasing power of our American customers, there is no doubt the effects of that policy will stimulate production and ease the burden of unemployment. All accountants who are called upon to interpret the existing income tax legislation will recall that
We'll realize.
will realize that imposition of the new tax upon the earnings of investment company reserves bristles with difficulties and is fraught with anomalies. Half a dozen questions will immediately spring to their mind. The treatment of investments in a subsidiary company, the case of financial and investment companies whose total incomes are derived from extraneous sources, the hardship of the new tax on the poorer shareholders, and the double taxation of the richer are only a few of the queries that will at once demand an answer. The whole subject has not yet been cleared from the fog that obscures every question of a political nature and its preliminary stages.
Good. Okay. 60 at top. 60.
It's like tongue-tied.
116.
I felt tongue-tied.
Very good. Okay. Caitlin and Brittany. Caitlin.
I totally did what you said earlier about the company. I totally love that line off. The case of financial investment.
Okay, just read what you have.
I'll read what I have.
Okay?
In every one of our stable industries, and these are the industries mostly affected by the existing
Recession.
The trouble arises not from under protection but from under consumption. If a bold financial policy will
Transform.
transform the demand that exists in our home markets into an effect demand.
Into an effective demand.
In other words, will increase the purchasing power of our American
effects.
effects of that policy, and I also messed up there too,
Keep going.
of unemployment, that's where I
Keep
missed
going.
the part.
Keep going.
All accountants who are called upon to interpret the existing
Income tax
income tax bill
legislation
legislation will realize that
imposition
the imposition of the new tax upon the
earnings
earnings unemployment company
of investment company reserves
reserves I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't know that word. With difficulties.
bristles with difficulties.
Bristles with difficulties and is fraught with anomalies. Half a dozen questions will immediately spring to their mind. The treatment of investments in a subsidiary company, I missed this, who is something incomes are
derived
from, bless you, from extraneous sources. The hardship of the new taxes on the poor shareholders and the trouble
The double.
tax of the rich.
The double taxation of the richer.
The richer are only a few of the inquiries that
Queries.
the queries are that will at once demand an answer. The whole subject has not yet been cleared from the law that obscures every question of a
Political.
political nature in its preliminary stages.
Okay. That was 242. That was tough. But that's a lot better. Yeah, I know you missed a line, but that's a lot better than last week, which was 286. So kudos to you. Okay, Brittany, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, begin.
In every one of our stable industries, and these are the industries mostly affected by the existing recession, the trouble arises not from under production, but from under consumption. If a bold financial policy will transform the demand that exists in our home markets into an effective demand, in other words, will increase the purchasing power of our American customers. There is no doubt the effects of that policy will stimulate production and ease the burden of unemployment. All accountants who are called upon to interpret the existing income tax legislation will realize that in impositions of the new tax upon the earnings of investment company reserves
Bristles.
bristles with difficulties and is fraught with
Anomalies.
have a
Half a dozen
questions will immediately spring to their mind. The treatment of investments in a subsidiary company, the cause of
the case of financial
the case of financial and investment companies whose total income
Are derived from extraneous
from extraneous sources. The hardship of the new tax on the
poor
poor shareholder is the double
and
tax,
the double
and the double taxation of the richer are only a few of the queries that will at once demand an answer. The whole subject has not yet been cleared from the fog that obscures every question of a political nature in its preliminary stages.
Cool. Yeah. I really liked how you read in a nice loud voice. That was probably the best so far. Okay. You got 120 for 157. Okay. Which last week was 138, so you're hovering around the same.
How do you determine the time? Is it just
Huh?
time, or is it time plus mistakes, or?
No, I'm not counting any of those.
So it's just the time?
Actual time.
Bye, Yvonne.
Okay, Chelsea and Rhonda. Now we got our two Speedy Gonzales here. Yeah.
Not this one.
Not this time.
Okay, Chelsea.
Hold on.
Shanti.
I know, right?
You ready? Begin.
In every one of our stable industries, and these are the industries mostly affected by the existing recession, the trouble arises not from under protection but from under consumption. If a bold financial policy will transform the demand that exists in our home markets into an effective demand, in other words, will increase the purchasing power of our American customers, there is no doubt the effects of that policy will stimulate production and ease the burden of unemployment. All accountants who are called upon to interpret the existing income tax legislation will realize that the imposition of the new tax upon the earnings of investment companies bristles with difficulties and is fraught with anomalies. Half a dozen questions will immediately spring to their mind. The treatment of investments in a subsidiary company, the case of the financial and investment companies whose total incomes are derived from extraneous sources, the hardships of the new tax on the poor shareholder, and the double taxation of the richer are only a few of the queries that will at once demand an answer. The whole subject has not yet been cleared from the fog that obscures every question of a political nature in its preliminary stages.
Wow.
You deserve a round of applause. Very good. Was that good?
You didn't even take a breath.
I know. 199. Cool. Last week was 93, but last week's was easy.
Yeah, this one's harder.
So that was really good. Okay, Rhonda. And let's see, Rhonda. Okay, you ready? Begin.
In every one of our stable industries, and those are the industries mostly affected by the existing recession, the trouble arises not from under protection but from under consumption. If a bold financial policy will transform the demand that consists in our home markets into an effective demand, in other words, will increase the purchasing power of our American customers, this is no doubt the effects of that policy will stimulate production and ease the burden of unemployment. All accountants who are called upon to interpret the existing income tax legislation will realize that the imposition of new tax upon the earnings of investment companies preserves Bristol's with difficulties and is fraught with an anomalies. Have a dozen questions will immediately sprung to their mind. The treatment of investment in a subsidiary company, the case of financial and investment companies whose total income are derived from extraneous sources, the hardship of the new tax on the poorer shareholders, and the troubled taxation of the richer are only a few of the queries that will at once demand an answer. The whole subject has not yet been cleared from the fog that obscures every question, a political nature in its preliminary stages.
Well, 60, 100, 106. Good job. I see that a couple of you seem to have written derived for derived. Am I wrong?
I think I did put drive.
You need to make sure you have a distinction between those two outlines.
What's the sentence that's in? I want to see what
Incomes are derived from.
the incomes are.
What is yours?
I do it in two strokes.
Derived.
Yeah.
Oh, it's because I wrote
Yeah, I did.
the brief that we had on here, DRIFD, so my brain thinks DR derived.
Yeah,
that's
What was the pro?
This is the brief, I see DR.
Oh yeah, okay. You can do it that way. But you see, I did not use the long vowel.
I did DR long IFT.
Yeah.
I use a short, just
My
EU.
brain just needs to.
So I mean, if you want to do that, but okay. Just make sure that you, when you're writing, and there might be other kinds of instances where you can't do it. You can't do the long I. Can't think of any else. Be careful with that.
But there is no word drive. Like I
Drive.
drived.
Yes, but
The way the outline is.
Oh,
you're true. That's true. But you could hear anything in English, okay, on the witness stand.
he drives.
I'll tell you, coming from Montreal, I had my attorney who hired me. She was a French-speaking lady who spoke English as her second language. And it was one of those awkward situations where she asked the witness, who was English, questions. And she says, well, had you went there before? So I have to write what she said. But she said to me afterwards, my English is not that good, so just fix it up. And which I can do because she's not on the witness stand. So I changed it to, had you gone there before? But you will hear things like that. People with very broken English, witnesses who don't have English as their first language, and they could easily say drived.
I heard people saying drove instead of drive.
Yeah,
Like
I mean
drove
anything.
there.
You can hear anything.
Drove there?
I did a job one time, and it was a workers' comp where the woman had carpal tunnel. And the attorney asked her where she worked, and she said she worked in a poetry factory. Wow, poetry factory, how cool. And then the attorney said, well, what do you do there? And she said, well, I pull the beaks and wings off chicks. And it was poultry, but she pronounced it poetry.
And so you
know,
put it sick.
No,
No,
I
you wrote
didn't.
poultry?
Because this was, Georgia, southern accent. Yeah,
So you put
so
poultry. I kind of see poetry.
poetry.
Yeah.
But I see poultry is,
That's Valerie right now. We're
yeah, so I mean, you got to use some common sense in there as well, even though it sounds like poetry. When they start pulling the beaks and wings off chicks, you kind of think, well, it's not very poetic.
Yeah.
Be prepared for anything.
Yeah. Okay, ready to shut this off?
I still have a couple more to do, but you
Oh,
can,
I'm
I think
sorry.
you can turn it off.
They're always
Thumbs up.
last. Have you noticed that?
Oh, are they?